In 2021, Pokémon released Celebrations, one of its best ever sets. Created for Pokémon's 25th anniversary, it features 25 iconic reprints from the game's history. Some choices make perfect sense, like the original Kanto starters, while others left players and collectors scratching their heads. Today I'll break down why each card in the set was chosen, focusing on how they performed in competitive play. Starting with the original 3 starters from base set, it's pretty obvious why they were chosen. However, these 3 were not created equal in the competitive scene. Of the 3, Blastoise was the best, abusing its Rain Dance Pokemon power to power up Water-type attackers quickly in a hostile environment of big basic decks, succeeding at the beginning of the game. Regardless, Blastoise stood out in this hostile environment as one of the few good decks in the historical base set era. Venusaur was probably the second best. Venusaur could use its Energy Trans Pokemon power to move grass energy around the board, which is pretty powerful, especially with the Pokemon Center Trainer card, which could easily heal your Pokemon for free after the energy had moved off of them. This strategy was hard pressed to succeed though in the toxic original era of the TCG, which was ruled by the energy removal and super energy removal cards, which made it nearly impossible for Venusaur to keep enough energy in play to be effective. Charizard is by far the worst of the 3, but that doesn't mean that nobody has tried to make it work. It actually had one big result from Japan where it ironically won the Blastoise Mega Battle Tournament in Japan. I highly recommend checking out Ruby Retro's videos covering Japan's full tournament history for more information on that. Charizard's most interesting competitive success, in my opinion though, actually came from Germany, where Blastoise Rain Dance was mistranslated to allow it to attach water energy to any Pokemon instead of just water-type Pokemon. Since Charizard can turn all energy attached to it into fire energy, these two Stage 2s made a pretty brutal combo. That was if they played with the incorrectly translated Blastoise. Frankly, I have no idea whether they played the card that way, or if they played it correctly, since there's not a lot of tournament data from then. Moving on, we have base set's Impostor Professor Oak, which might be Celebration's most confusing choice to reprint. This evil counterpart to Professor Oak is not a super successful competitive card, nor is it an iconic collectible card. If there was one card you really didn't want to pull from your Celebrations pack, it was definitely him. Impostor Professor Oak isn't a one-off appearance on just this card though. It was reprinted twice, first as Impostor Oak's Revenge and Impostor Professor Oak's Invention. Impostor Professor Oak has also shown up in both the Pokemon Adventures manga as a disguised Kadabra, and in the How I Became a Pokemon card manga, where he'd actually become a surrogate grandfather. Finally, his most notable appearance is in the 1997 Space World demo of Pokemon Gold and Silver. However, he was eventually cut for the vinyl release of the games. Did he deserve a spot in the set? Probably not, but I'd say there's at least a lot more to this character than meets the eye. Next up is Dark Gyarados. This guy debuted in the Team Rocket set and represents a long line of sinister cards in the Pokemon trading card game. The Dark Pokemon were evolved by being raised by Team Rocket, and they featured a darker window on their card. While generally having a lower HP than their regular counterparts, in exchange they got pretty high damaging attacks. Gyarados was the star of the booster pack artwork of the Japanese Rocket Gang set, which likely explains why it was chosen to represent this mechanic. Unfortunately, it was not very playable though. The Dark Pokemon would return in much stronger forms in Generation 2 and 3 of the TCG, and we'd even see a Dark counterpart with Light Pokemon in Generation 2. I think cards like Dark Gengar, Dark Feraligatr, or Dark Tyranitar could have been better picks, but they decided to go with the original generation for evil goodness. Also from the Team Rocket set is Here Comes Team Rocket, an iconic card featuring Jesse, James, and Meowth. This card has been printed several times throughout the history of the Pokemon TCG, being reprinted in the EX Team Rocket Return set and the 20th Anniversary XY Evolution set. Unfortunately, the effect of the card where it flips over both players' prize cards has always been pretty mediocre or completely outclassed, including being outclassed by the other Holo Trainer in the Team Rocket set, Rocket's Sneak Attack, which was an incredible card. A card that isn't outclassed is Rocket Zapdos from the Gym Challenge set. This Pokemon represents the original owner's Pokemon mechanic from the Gym sets, which is a mechanic that just came back as recently as 2025. Rocket Zapdos immediately upon release joined the elite class of big basics that dominated the early Pokemon TCG metagame. Rocket Zapdos boasted a solid HP total and arguably the best single energy attack in the game at that point. Not only was it powerful, but it also resisted another of the best cards, Hitmonchan. It would stay relevant as the Neo sets rolled in, taking advantage of new cards like Metal Energy and winning lots of tournaments, including the Italy Super Trainer Showdown qualifier and the New Jersey Super Trainer Showdown. Last for the Generation 1 cards is Blank's Pikachu, or Birthday Pikachu as it's called, a promo card which was given out in the Create Your Own Pokemon card campaign in 2000 in the West. In Japan, it was released in the 1998 all-card calendar. Japan would actually get many subsequent prints of Birthday Pikachu given out at Pokemon Centers and in the How I Became a Pokemon card manga, but we would not get these. During the Black and White era, they even gave out exclusive Audino at the Pokemon Centers to people on their birthday. Birthday Pikachu is actually an incredible card by Generation 1 standards, since it can KO most of the popular basic Pokemon in the metagame. However, since its effect relied on being on your birthday, it was not allowed to be played. If you've been enjoying this video, do please be sure to give it a like. Your support means a lot in helping the channel grow. Anyway, sorry for interrupting your lesson, back to the content. Unfortunately for Generation 2 fans, the Celebration set only featured 2 cards from the Neo era and none from the E series of sets. Compared to Generation 1's 7 total cards, it feels a bit low. Regardless, these 2 picks are pretty awesome. First is Cleffa from Neo Genesis, a representative of Neo's baby Pokemon mechanic, which required the opponent to flip a coin and get heads in order to attack if a baby Pokemon was in the active spot. This protected decks from the turn 1 knockouts that became pretty common at the end of the Gym era. Cleffa also helped decks with its Eek attack, which gave players a new hand of 7 cards. In an era dominated by powerful hand disruption like Lass, Rocket's Sneak Attack, and the Rocket's Trap, Cleffa gave decks a way to get a new hand if theirs had been taken away, unless you were stopped by your opponent's Cleffa. Cleffa is maybe the most deserving card of this entire set, as it was the only Pokemon to be a near mandatory 4 of in every single deck for the entire time it was around. Generation 2's other representative is Shining Magikarp from Neo Revelation. The Shining Pokemon were the first of many shiny cards throughout the entire history of the Pokemon TCG. The Shinings in particular were unique cards with really weird energy costs and a limit of 1 copy per deck per Shining Pokemon. These Pokemon featured in Neo Revelation and Neo Destiny, and they're iconic Generation 2 cards and the first of their kind of shiny Pokemon. However, I do think that reprinting the iconic red Shining Gyarados may have been a more fitting choice given its role in the video games. However, Gyarados was chosen to be reprinted as Dark Gyarados instead. On to Generation 3, we skip the initial year of E-card adjacent Pokemon to arrive at Team Magma's Groudon from EX Team Magma vs Team Aqua. Team Magma's Groudon was most notably the iconic headline attacker of the Team Magma deck archetype that took over the 2004 World Championships, being the only deck as of now to win all 3 age divisions of the tournament. The secret Magma deck from Japan defeated all 3 of the best decks from the West in each age division, making Pokemon TCG history. Next up we have Rocket's Admin from the EX Team Rocket Return set. There's tons of iconic and powerful cards that could have been chosen from this set, but maybe none are so iconic as Rocket's Admin, a supporter card that has each player shuffle away their hand and draw a new hand based on how many prize cards they had left. This iconic effect lets slower decks punish faster decks by limiting their options, but is also just a solid setup supporter for decks to use in the early game. Rocket's Admin was in a majority of decks for the entire time it was around in the game, and would go on to later inspire many of the other best supporter cards of all time, like N and Iono that would come later. Rocket's Admin also appeared in the Pokemon Adventures manga, being named Surd, and was a Rocket executive there. Mew EX is one of the most iconic and playable of the original EX cards, headlining the Legend Maker set. It also represents the original Pokemon EX cards, which were stronger Pokemon that gave up 2 prize cards when knocked out. Mew EX was incredibly playable in decks since its versatile Pokebody allowed it to use any attacks on any Pokemon in play, as long as Mew EX had the necessary energy to pay for those attacks. Mew EX was first used in 2006, where it saw play in decks such as LBS, a Blastoise EX Toolbox, and in the World Championship winning Mew Trick deck piloted by Jason Glazinski, where Mew EX copied Manectric's Disconnect attack to lock the opponent out of playing cards. In the 2006-2007 season, Mew continued to succeed, being used in toolbox-style decks like the Destiny deck and gaining new attacks to copy like Jirachi EX's Shield Beam or Rayquaza EX's Special Circuit. Mew EX's success would continue at its last tournament on the international stage, the 2007 World Championship, where it featured in Tom Rue's Legendary Ascent deck. or Absolutions, or Speed Spread, whatever you want to call it. This deck would give Mew EX another Worlds title under its belt. We'd even see a spiritual successor of Mew EX come back during the Black and White era, being a great card once again. Gardevoir EX Delta from the EX Dragon Frontier set is a representative of the Delta Species mechanic that defined the third part of the EX series of sets. These alternate-typed Pokemon from the fictional Hoenn region are an iconic collector favorite and part of many competitively successful decks. Gardevoir EX has a wholly unique mechanic in its Imprison Pokepower, where you place an Imprison counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon and completely lock them from using Pokepowers or Pokebodies. Gardevoir EX is the only Imprison card ever printed, which makes it one of a kind. Gardevoir EX saw some success when paired with other strong cards like Flygon EX Delta, and being in the 2007 Scythe deck when paired with Scizor EX and Swampert EX. Gardevoir EX's reputation in the competitive scene, though, mostly comes from the EX block format, where it is one of the strongest decks in the format when paired with the other Delta Gardevoir. Umbreon Star represents the Gold Star mechanic from the EX series of sets. Star Pokemon are 1 per deck basic Pokemon with pretty strong effects. While Umbreon Star is not one of the most powerful stars in competitive play, it is one of the most iconic. It is one of 2 non-holo Gold Star cards alongside Espeon Star, since it was printed in the POP Series 5 packs given out at tournaments. This makes it extremely rare, but not as rare as the Japanese version, in which players had to acquire 70,000 points from Pokemon Daisuke Club events in a pretty short time span. Moving on to Generation 4. The inclusion of Gardevoir EX Delta meant that we dodged having the Terra Gardevoir from Secret Wonders included in this set. However, Generation 4 still got 4 great picks in celebrations. First up is Claydol from Great Encounters. Claydol is famous for its role in most decks from 2008 to 2010. It is used for its Cosmic Power Pokepower, which puts up to 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of the deck, and then draws cards until you have 6 cards in hand. This is arguably the best draw consistency effect ever printed on a Pokemon, and it shows in how much play Claydol saw, with an innumerable amount of tournament wins, not to mention 2 World Championship titles. Luxray GL Level X debuted in the Platinum Rising Rivals set. It represents the new Pokemon SP mechanic, which were basic Pokemon that are owned by trainers. These SP Pokemon worked in tandem with other SP Pokemon in a tailored set of trainer cards too. Some of the best Pokemon SP were Level X Pokemon, the main mechanic of the Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum block, which is another stage of Pokemon that goes on top of a fully evolved Pokemon, giving it more HP and access to new attacks and effects. Luxray GL Level X is arguably the best Level X, since its Bright Look Pokepower lets players target down their opponent's benched Pokemon. It also made for an incredibly efficient attacker with its Flash and Back attack. Luxray GL Level X is so good that it was played in both SP-focused decks and in regular decks that just wanted to use its talents as well. In 2009, it was released in time for US Nationals and Worlds, where it would take both titles. It also continued to see play in the following season, most infamously with its partner in crime, Garchomp C Level X, another SP Level X card that was best used for its Dragon Rush attack to target the opponent's valuable Pokemon on the bench for 80 damage, such as Claydol. Combined with Luxray, it formed the iconic LuxChomp deck, which was a disruptive and quick deck that excelled at taking out low HP targets and abusing weakness to take down bigger HP targets. Garchomp C Level X also saw use in other SP-style decks like the Sableye deck, which was an aggressive hand-lock deck, and the Dialga Chomp deck, an SP deck focused on using Garchomp C Level X's Pokepower Healing Breath. It also could be paired with non-SP Pokemon, such as the Gengar C deck that paired Garchomp C Level X with Gengar from Stormfront, another of the era's best cards. Combined with Luxray, Garchomp C Level X would take the 2010 World Championship title, but they wouldn't get a chance to do it again in 2011 due to the emergency mid-season rotation removing them from the game. Donphan Prime is the representative of the short Heart Gold and Soul Silver block, with the new Prime cards being stronger versions of regular cards. Donphan Prime is one of the best Prime cards, seeing play in 2010 as a bulky attacker that could counter Luxray GL Level X, and continuing to see play in 2011 in a variety of aggressive strategies that relied on its 1 energy Earthquake to put a lot of pressure early on. Its most famous appearances are in 2011's Stage 1's deck, which uses 3 different Stage 1 attackers, and the Truth, an iconic deck that took second at the 2011 World Championships. Following the release of Black and White and the emergency mid-season rotation that got rid of a ton of cards, Reshiram would dominate the game. Black and White is also the set they debuted full art cards to the game, which is why Reshiram sports its iconic full art print. The Reshiram deck was an incredibly popular deck, using Typhlosion Prime to continually refill Reshiram's blue fair attack. On the other end, Magnabore was an iconic deck that used Emboar from Black and White to attach extra fire energy to power up Reshiram or Magnezone Prime. This Magnabore deck would end up winning the 2011 World Championship. Zekrom Fullard is the yin for Reshiram's yang. This card succeeded early on in Turbo-style decks that attempted to launch a turn 1 attack with the deck called ZPS, which would end up winning 2011 Canadian Nationals. Later on, Zekrom would get even better with the release of Electric, which could stream energy to Zekrom or other lightning attackers, or eventually Mewtwo EX. This Electric strategy would go on to win the 2012 World Championships in the Seniors Division. Zekrom would continue being an attacking option as long as Electric was legal. Speaking of Mewtwo EX, this card defined the game upon its release in 2012, when the big basic 2-prize EX Pokemon stormed into the metagame. Mewtwo EX was not only the strongest attacker when it released, but it was also the best way to take out opposing Mewtwo EX, since it was weak to psychic types. Mewtwo EX dominated the 2012 World Championships, being in all 3 Age Division winning decks, and in being in 6 of the top 8 Masters decks, most notably the broken Darkrai Mewtwo deck. Mewtwo EX continued to succeed in 2013, 14, and 15, mostly as a tech attacker in big basic decks, where it would win the 2014 US National Championship, and it would come back in a big way in 2015, where it took another Worlds title when played in Jacob Van Wagner's Archie's Blastoise deck. With 2 Worlds titles under its belt, Mewtwo EX is one of the most iconic EXs of Generation 5. Heading into X and Y, we have an EX that is not as iconic, Xerneas EX. Xerneas EX was lightly picked to represent the brand new fairy type introduced by Generation 6. Xerneas EX, however, was not that good of a card, being outclassed by not just other EXs in the metagame, but its counterpart Yveltal EX as well. Spare some smaller results in fairy-focused decks, Xerneas EX's one big breakthrough came at the 2014 World Championships, where a rogue Mega Kangaskhan EX deck would take 3rd place. After playing the deck, I have no idea how it made it this far, and Xerneas might just be the worst attacker in the deck, but it's a result nonetheless. Of course, with the introduction of Mega Pokemon EX in X and Y, one of them had to make the cut for celebrations, and they chose Mega Rayquaza EX. Not only does Mega Rayquaza EX represent the Mega Pokemon EX, but it also represents the ancient trait cards printed in the 2nd year of X and Y. Mega Rayquaza EX is one of the scariest Mega EX cards, since it can evolve on the first turn of the game and threaten to attack with Emerald Break. Several factors would hold Mega Rayquaza EX back from seeing the success it should have for a lot of its lifespan, but it was quite good in the 2017 season once a certain bug wasn't around to stop it. And yes, for those about to comment, it was definitely better in the expanded format too. When players think of the 2017 season though, there's another Pokemon that comes to mind, and that Pokemon is Tapu Lele GX, the representative of the GX Pokemon in Celebrations. Pokemon GX were a new 2-prize mechanic in the Pokemon TCG. Unlike the big basic EXs though, they evolved normally like the old EX cards from Generation 3. They also featured unique once per game GX attacks with powerful effects. Tapu Lele GX stood out from the initial run of GXs as the clear best, since its Wonder Tag ability let decks consistently set up in the early game and win in the late game. Tapu Lele GX was in nearly every single deck when it released, and it continued its excellence through 2018 as well. It's no wonder that with a card this versatile, it would obtain 5 of the 6 world titles it could have achieved in its 2-year run. And that is the 25 cards that made up our Classic Collection's 25th anniversary set, and the many reasons why they may have been chosen. Hopefully you've learned why some of the cards were chosen for this set. While I don't agree with some of their choices and the amount of Generation 1 cards picked in particular, Celebrations is still one of my all-time favorite sets, since it honors the history of the Pokemon TCG without just being another base set reprint. It felt like for the first time, they created a set that honored the things important to me. A 3rd base set in 2016 rung a little hollow to someone who grew up on Diamond and Pearl, but a set that honored the entire competitive history of the Pokemon TCG while featuring iconic cards felt like a love letter to the player base. Hopefully, for the 30th anniversary, we see another Celebrations-esque set with even more reprints. There's still plenty of cards for retro formats that are pretty expensive that I'd love to see the price come down on with a nice reprint copy. Let me know what you hope to see in the 30th anniversary set in the comment section down below. Maybe you don't even want to see a Celebration style set at all, but maybe something like a Gen 2 reprint set. If you enjoyed this video, do be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you all so much for watching and supporting the channel, and thank you all for 6,000 subscribers as well. I will see you in the next video.